Okay, and Brooke, just double checking you can hear me clear again.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Kaitlyn Okrusch, as most of you in the room know, and for those on the recording, if you watch this. Hello. And I am sitting here and we'll be talking to you today about an amazing opportunity I was given by Mike Okrusch here, who's core faculty, and through IIC, so the Institute for International Conservation, to do some pretty exciting work in the Caribbean. Specifically on the island of St. Vincent, and we'll get oriented later because I had no idea where that was when Mike had asked if I was interested. And also on one of the most elusive and beautiful little creatures, the Whistling Warbler, that I was able to get to know a little better while on St. Vincent. So I like to just kind of leave a teaser here from ashes to opportunity. And this is a photo of me in the field doing hard point counts, which we'll get into. So. Imagine you wake up to this site one day on the home in which you call the island of St. Vincent. You wake up, you've heard rumors of the mountain, this volcano, Soufrière, starting to wake up back in December of 2020. And finally, on April 9th, 2021, it decides to unleash. And you see this ash plume start to go up 16 kilometers high. They actually found ash all the way over in Australia. And your heart sinks, right? This natural disaster. They're actually so captivatingly beautiful too, but you know that there's going to be some devastation at hand. So this photo was taken on actually April 13th, and this is where our journey began for us during getting this research going.
The establishment of federal authority. No reference government.
And it's that tiny little island in the Lesser Antilles, the Caribbean. So we have the Greater Antilles. You can see Florida here, but we were all the way down on this tiny little island, close to the port of Spain in South America. And St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So St. Vincent is this larger island here, and the Grenadines are 32 smaller islands and cays that kind of kite tail off of St. Vincent. And we focused our research efforts, which I'll get into, on the island of St. Vincent, where Soufrière is located. So this massive eruption of this stratovolcano really called attention to the urgent need of collaboration and research efforts regarding the biodiversity and conservation of species and plants and animals on St. Vincent. And this collaboration started with an idea from BirdsCaribbean and Mike at Antioch here and the Department of Forestry on St. Vincent. There's a lot of vulnerable species that live on island habitats. And of course, many others who also helped within the parameters outside of these organizations, volunteers, locals. There was another university down there doing work on the St. Vincent parrot, which I'll show you a picture of. But I really wanted to highlight that this conservation effort was purely collaborative and essential, and that this natural disaster really kind of pushed people to call attention and get us down. And so my journey began, and this is a photo I got to take window seat flying into St. Vincent. Mike and the BirdsCaribbean crew had already been down there a couple days. scouting out locations for this mysterious little bird called the Whistling Warbler that we were about to try and understand if it survived the volcanic eruptions. And not a lot has been known about this bird or discovered in the past. So a lot of mystery. This is just a picture to kind of give you a sense of what St. Vincent was like. This mix of mountainous steep forest, lush green, and these beautiful colored houses dotting the hillsides all over. And a lot of them are built up on stilts too, which was pretty impressive. And that's actually La Soufrière in the back. So this was taken on the east side of the island. So La Soufrière, this is on the northwest side, the opposite side, but this is Glenroy Game, and he is also known as Kiwi. He's kind of our local birding guru. He is part of the St. Vincent Forestry Department, and he's the wildlife unit head, and he is just a wealth of knowledge, and especially, well, everything but birds. And he took us around to most of the sites and gave us instilled a lot of knowledge about his land, and graciously took us on this 2-week adventure through the jungle. But you can see the volcanic ash deposits, and this was Mike was there too, as of May 31st, 2022. So the impacts of the volcano are still being seen. The land was barren, and still parts of it are, from just the pure amount of ash that fell. But luckily, no humans were harmed. Everyone made it out of those red and orange zones close to the volcano on St. Vincent. No one was harmed, but that cannot be said for a lot of the biodiversity on the island. So, star of the show, why we were down there. This beautiful, elusive bird, the Whistling Warbler. Now, I hadn't heard of the Whistling Warbler either before Mike had posed this opportunity to me. It's endemic, and all that means is that it's only found on St. Vincent Island in the whole world. It's also an endangered species through the IUCN. It's also very unique because it's monotypic. There's no subspecies. So this accelerates its vulnerability to not only from land use impacts, deforestation, natural disasters like volcanic eruptions, but to our human accelerated advances too, and how we're interacting with the world. So only 2 scientific papers are out there about this bird, which seems incredible, given kind of our resources at this point in the conservation world. And one of those is actually unpublished too. So much of a knowledge gap, so much to understand and figure out and learn flora from this bird. It prefers dense mountainous forests on extreme slopes of ridges and slippery ravines. And as we learned, that is hard to navigate, and it makes a lot of sense why not a lot of people would be out there. Basically funding and time, and the resources to send people out on these expeditions in the mountains, hard terrain to hike. But we did it for 2 weeks for our pilot study, and we slipped, we fell, we hiked our butts off, and we'll get to what we found. Now I wanted to play, let's see if this works. And I guess if someone on Zoom can let me know, this is the call of the Whistling Warbler. Everyone on Zoom,
Shut your sound and shut your,
The other volume.
mic.
So that is the sound that we heard and that we were searching for. And we actually ended up seeing and hearing this bird a lot more than we thought, which was a delightful surprise to all of us on this expedition team out there. It's skulky. This, as you can see, it has this nice dark coloring, has that kind of white necklace and eye ring, and it holds its tail cocked almost all the time that we saw it. But it kind of sits in this mid layer of the canopy in the shadows, and often we heard it more than we saw it. That is a sketch from the 1800s of this bird. And this just, I threw this in here because there's still not a lot known about the plumage, about the difference between males and females, their breeding biology. So a lot of room to grow and understand. There's also other land bird species of concern on this island. And what is there? Let's see. There's at least 14 Lesser Antilles restricted range species. So birds that are only going to be found in the Lesser Antilles. So rufous-throated solitaire, we were listening and looking for, Antillean euphonium in the center there, and of course the iconic and the country's bird, St. Vincent parrot, which also has its own plight given the volcanic eruption. And a bunch of our crew that we kind of joined up with here and there is from Florida International University, and they were kind of doing a similar trajectory, trying to figure out and assess the status of the parrot after that eruption. Just a few others, because I know there's some herp lovers out there. So Granada Clawgecko, the St. Vincent black snake, which Glenn Roy, our guide, forestry, believe did his master's on, and St. Vincent frog as well. So how do we do this? How do you go find something that many people have never seen or have methods for? Well, we took a point count method called ProAlis. This was kind of formed in South America and now has kind of been adopted by BirdsCaribbean, the organization that we partnered with, to other tropical areas. So they're trying to move this protocol into the Caribbean. So there's different methods to assess bird populations, and point counts is one of those, where we basically go to a point, we assess everything we hear, we know everything we see or hear for 10 minutes, every bird species, write it down, and then we do a vegetation survey to get a lay of the land. So we were trying to, hey Minna, understand the Whistling Warbler habitat preference and use, and where they were at after this. So we did 3 to 8 points per trail, per area. We visited points multiple times for detectability, and we did a playback for the Whistling Warbler specifically. So a playback for a point count is when you actually mimic that bird's song or call to see if they're around or if they're going to respond. And we do that. We would do 2 minutes holding up a speaker of song, and then we would listen for 3. And often we would get Whistling Warbler coming in right over our heads at the places that we did. So it was really exciting to hear that kind of haunting whistling call that you were able to hear. We enter that into eBird. So eBird is that universal database where people can go and put all of their bird sightings in all of the world. iNaturalist, Mike was iNatting all the time. Lots of different new plants, animals, critters. And then we also had another piece of this, which was audio mics, so ARUs. So these devices that we would put out into the forest on these spots that we did hear whistling warblers. And we set them out for a week's time. continuously recording. This is Lisa Sorensen. She is the executive director for BirdsCaribbean, and we were at this is a parrot watch site that forestry goes and uses to watch and monitor parrots. But it was on our route to a Whistling Warbler. So there's cool photos. There's me. I kind of looked like a turtle the whole trip. I looked around, giant camera, a lot of water. Mike's in the background. I think I'm natting something. This is Jeff. He is from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and kind of a software programmer, eBird extraordinaire. So they were helping us. Jeff and Mike Sorensen, Lisa's husband, and Lisa, and then Glenn Roy and a few others from forestry were the ones doing these point counts. There's a lot of hiking, and you can't tell, but like it's pretty steep. So definitely gotta go work out every day. We surveyed forest type and vegetation at each point, to assess what the warblers prefer. We're still very unsure about a lot of things, even in the published paper. There was a lot of question marks about the types of vegetation, but we surveyed for the slope, habitat, forest type, which there were 4 different types of habitat we reported. There was primary forest, older secondary forest, younger secondary forest, which was primarily near the volcanoes and stuff that was just starting to regenerate. And tree plantations like blue maho. So those were just to give you a kind of a taste of what the forests are like down there. Of course, you got canopy cover. And then as we went, we kind of shifted and adapted what we were looking for. We initially had presence and absence of moss, primarily on trees, given what we think warblers are using to make nests. Heliconias, those were, anyway, heliconia is a type of plant that we were looking for as well that could be indicative of the wetter habitat that warblers might prefer. And then umbellata, which is pictured actually below, that was a plant that Glenn Roy had given us insight that he had noticed is around the warbler habitat. Looking for those things, a couple photos, just the different types of forests. We have Lisa, Mike, and Jeff kind of in this really beautiful old forest. And we also have I believe this is blue maho. Mike, do you remember if that's
one of the, some sort of plantation.
Yeah, plantation. So very mono, could tell easily when you would hit a plantation. And banana plantations are big down there too. And then we have here's me and Glenn Roy, and you can see the ash deposit. It's hiking. This was near the volcano, and you can see the kind of the vast array of landscapes that we were able to survey. We also use basal area. So here's Mike and I doing a survey. So you take your Bitterlick prism, that little glass, and see just to get an idea of the density of the forest types. So that was fun to use something that I used from, shout out to Ray's community ecology class. And then, yeah, the audio moss, so the ARUs, autonomous recording units, that we still haven't analyzed the data. And Mike, I think that's something in the future to kind of clearly hours of sounds to go through, but trying to detect those, not only the whistling warbler, but those other species that are vulnerable after such a devastating natural disaster. We also started to see, well, this is actually a whistling warbler and bamboo, peeking out right there. But bamboo was something we started to look for, as well as presence or absence of water. And pictured here, this was an area called Kenton Falls, which was maybe the most active for whistling warblers. And I think at one point there was 2 or 3 warblers that were calling and approaching us for playback. So, and I think, Mike, did you find a nest too? You kind of had
Old nest.
an old nest,
Essentially.
possibly. So exciting weeds here. So, of course, this was a pilot study, right? 2 weeks. We crammed a lot in there. So we surveyed 8 sites, did 46 points, and we did almost 100+ point counts. It was pretty much like wake up, right? At crack of dawn, get out there early. We only did point counts till 12 p.m. too, right? Because then that starts to shift, bird activity starts to change. Every day for 14 days, almost every day for 14 days. We did have a few break days. And we detected the warbler by sight and or sound at least 35% of the locations. So we were kind of going into this not even knowing if we would hear or see one or a few, but here we were kind of pleasantly surprised. And so you can see on this map, this was actually made for, there's a blog article that BirdsCaribbean had put out. And they made this map showing a few different things. It's kind of tiny, so I apologize, but the pink diamonds are the pre-2021 eruption Whistling Warbler sightings on eBird. So just sightings people noted before volcanic eruption, before we were down there, clearly. Blue diamonds are our paralysis point counts, and the places we saw the Whistling Warbler, and or heard. And then paralysis point counts with we're looking at the yellow circles here, where we didn't. So you can kind of see that there is a difference. And surprisingly, we saw and heard the warbler close to where Soufrière had erupted and impacted heavily on the northeast side of the island, which is also the windward side. So it's more moist. Naturally, which makes sense too when you look down here. Those trade winds are bringing in more moisture versus the leeward side on the west where we didn't detect. And moisture is kind of, and lushness is kind of seeming to be a pattern that we started to notice, again with the water, bamboo, the types of vegetation that we're growing, that we're using, the moss present. So a few surprises along the way. I'm going to pause. Does anyone have any questions so far? There'll be time at the end, but I feel like I'm talking very fast. All right. And Mike, I don't know if you want to speak to the results more. I did not do all the analysis. I did all the data entry and data recording, but Mike is the analysis guru, so.
Yeah, that was great, Kaitlyn. Yeah, we still are working with the data and with the audio loss. We're going to be working with a different organization, Rainforest Connection, who has some automatic classifiers to we're going to maybe develop with them, try to automatically detect the warbler and other birds using the audio loss. But yeah, this so far it's been, yeah, great. Yeah, more birds on the eastern side that we were detecting. You go back a slide or two. There's yeah, just in terms of the time of year, we were there in May, and it's possible that they're breeding earlier, is what Glenroy thinks. So we're going to try to get down there earlier next year. We did find a few nests that looked like they were used already, and some of them had some bamboo kind of leaves in them, and moss and things, but they may have been used already. So we're going to try a little bit earlier next year so that we can hit the breeding season.
Yeah, and I guess I should have clarified too, for our point counts for paralysis, we detected and noted everything that we saw within 30 meters. So I forgot to mention that. We also would note flyovers too. So for Whistling Warbler, or a parrot, or something flew over our heads during that. Yeah, time of year, it's and that's why Pro Alice is cool, and they're adopting these tropical. A lot of people are reconsidering how we do a lot with birds based on neotropical birds and their life cycles. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Winter. Our winter. So yes, here we go. I already kind of said that. So yes, this warbler, steep mountainous water slopes with natural non-planted forest. This is a possible whistling warbler nest, and no one has. Glenroy has found them in the past, but never documented where or when. But this one he had found on the trail, one called Tiburon, and I'll actually right here, Montreal and Tiburon is where we were able to see this, and you can see the moss kind of oblong too, and I think we determined these were like old bamboo leaves that they weave together, and it kind of hangs down. They kind of tuck it in down off the vegetation, and they're pumping in and out this way. So it's not like a puff nest. It's almost like an oriole type nest. So that was really exciting, and there's more work too and observations to be done. We sat for a while at one point and watched what we thought might be an active nest. We watched maybe for almost an hour, but didn't see any signs of birds putting in or kind of alarmed behavior by the nest. So more work to be done there. And a lot more work to come in general. So this is actually a picture of a whistling warbler that Mike was able to capture. And that was maybe one of the most frustrating things, was to try and take a photo of this bird. It would fly in up, usually above our heads, so you wouldn't notice that right away. And then you'd look up, and then everyone's like trying to be quiet. And then everyone's like trying to take out their cameras, but it was pretty easily spooked. So it was funny at points to just stop and watch everyone trying to get the photo. But Mike got a great one, and if you look on eBird, there's not too terribly many photos out there that are like clear and clean. So this was pretty exciting to capture. So we want to, of course, continue monitoring and researching next year. And they're BirdsCaribbean and Mike and St. Vincent Forestry Department have put in for a big grant, and that went through, I believe. Yes.
Yeah, we're
contingent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully there's funding to keep this research going. And a few things, we still aren't quite certain about elevation. So normally, what we observed and what people in the past observed was 300 to like 550 is usually their elevation range where they're nesting on those mountainous slopes. But we're still unsure, and we need to do more survey points below and above 300 and 600 to rule that out completely. And of course, the overarching goal is to eventually have the people of the forestry department down there and the locals be able to monitor on their own, right? Have a sustaining program for them to keep all this research going. And so a big part of that, and something that I value a lot, is the educational side of this. A lot of locals didn't, we would play the song and they would know that call, but they didn't know who was making it. Where like the St. Vincent parrot is pretty iconic in all of the locals. It's their bird of pride down there. The whistling warbler has kind of fallen back into the shadows and taken kind of a backseat role in the conservation world. I mean, it's tiny, it's not, flashy, and it's hard to find, so it makes sense. Unlike a beautiful, flamboyantly colored parrot. So, elevating kind of the whistling warbler and the status of people around the world and the locals, and getting their knowledge and wisdom and consent and all of those things to help make sure that their biodiversity down there is preserved. So, and of course all those other type kind of vulnerable birds, have, like I mentioned in the past, sort of solitaire until they and that is all going to be, I think there's going to be a workshop happening this February. And then of course writing a conservation action plan for them to utilize the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Department of Forestry for the future years. This is just a photo collage. The colors down there were incredible. Island life, incredible. If you get the chance to go to St. Vincent, very beautiful. And yeah, it's just the biomes down there. Ocean. We kind of had a crazy experience with a sea turtle. We ended up kind of saving a sea turtle from poaching while we were there, and just kind of like going from the volcano in the mountains down to the beach. It's just mesmerizing, really. Yeah. So I always kind of come back to this quote in a lot of different ways, but Baba Diom, he was a Senegalese conservation forestry person, and he said this at the IUCN conference, I think in the 80s, but I really think it holds true, and it kind of ties together that education piece for me again. So in the end, we'll only conserve only what we love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. And so I hope that the whistling warbler, we can understand it better in order to preserve it. And it takes time to understand something. It takes time and effort and a love of something. So I was really thankful to be able to have some insight into its world for a little bit. So, of course, tremendous thanks to Mike, who presented this opportunity to me. And of course, I see folks of Josh, Jason, and Mike, Lisa Sorensen, Executive Director of BirdsCaribbean, who is the other large partner in this, for funding and research, and Jeff at Cornell, and of course, Glenn Roy. It was really fun to get to know all the St. Vincent Forestry staff, volunteers, and of course Peter, who helped me study my bird songs for hours, so for those point counts. And that's it. Sorry, that was long.
That's great.
I have a question of for further future studies, because it sounds like it doesn't, you guys don't have, like, we don't have a full idea of what the habitat range is for these birds on the island, like how large of a range one singular warbler lives. Are you thinking in the future of, it would be really interesting to see if, like, putting a backpack tracker on one and seeing how wide its range is on the island? Would that be like a possibility?
I think Mike, I'm gonna hand this over to you, since I was honestly like kind of a field assistant, and this is not in any way like my master's project, so I think I'll hand it over to
Yeah,
Mike.
that'd be interesting. So we could put a radio transmitters. The birds are pretty small, so we'd have to, I think transmitters would only last a few weeks for a month or two on this kind of species, and you'd have to track them, which might be pretty difficult in this terrain. But it's possible. Another option, what we were kind of doing is also just seeing where birds are counter singing with each other. So one bird singing here, one bird singing here. And then the next bird is 200 meters. So you can kind of get an idea of their territory size or home range based on where they're singing. So it's based on our initial surveys, it seems like every about 200 meters, there 150, 200 meters, there's a new bird. That's likely different from the last bird that we heard, but it might vary in habitats or areas too. But yeah, further research, putting some backpacks on birds could definitely be useful. Catching some individuals, but yeah, our focus at least right now is doing more, just seeing where the birds are, and kind of find a nest to document, because no one's ever written anything down on about any of this nest for this endangered species. Yeah. And that happens a lot in the tropics and in island species or just tropical areas. There's a lot of bird species outside of the United States or outside of temperate ecosystems where there's just not a whole lot known, and just due to capacity of local people to do the work, and then also funding and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I have two comments and a question. Could you go back to the slide with the quote on it?
Yes.
So comment one is, that's such a killer picture, and like on the internet you see these like inspirational quotes with this like incredibly like beautiful photograph behind it, and that is like up there with the best of them. It's like such a good picture. So yeah, you should. That's awesome. Two, really appreciate like the storytelling that you wove into the presentation. That was awesome.
That was for you.
I like it. I like it. And my question is, so you have this great experience here, interest in this side of things, and I know about how deeply you're invested in things about educational approaches in the educational system. So I'm wondering, like, how you touched on it a little bit, talking about education in this context, but I'm wondering how you see these two areas of interest and experience kind of talking to each other, and how maybe these kinds of experiences inform your thinking about the work of educators. Yeah.
You hit something that I had realized on this slide that I just kind of glossed over, and that's a little bit about me and where I'm coming from, and how this all kind of formed anyway. So I'm in the science teacher licensure pathway, which is not conservation bio here at the but I came into Antioch having done bird work for the past 6 years before that. I fell in love with birds at a young age actually, but kind of came back to them later on in life. And I was always felt like a rock in a hard place of choosing.
You're good now.
Of choosing, do I dedicate my life to bird things or do I dedicate my life to teaching? Antioch felt like a great place to not choose and try and marry both of those things. And so I was the TA for Mike's ornithology class here, so that's how I got to know Mike and work with him. And then yeah, kind of this deep love and exploration of teaching Paul in my concentration. And so for me, a lot of the time we're missing that kind of that connection between like hard science research and like the people who it's affecting and the things that it's affecting. And that's where this project really drew me in, because in order to do the research side, we need the local people. We need their knowledge. And so it's knowledge transfer both ways, which is really beautiful. So we couldn't have done what we did or accomplished what we did without the locals and their intimate knowledge of their land, their resources, and vice versa. You know, we have funding and kind of these protocols that we can help teach them in order to kind of make a holistic thing out of conservation. So I appreciate your question. And as far as, I think for me and a lot of the work actually in like your class and with Gopal, for me, it's all boiling down to breaking down these like isolated walls that we've built between science and teaching or what have you, breaking down the walls between what a scientist is and what a scientist does and the people who aren't scientists. And I think that as a future science teacher, I want to encourage for everyone to prove that they are scientists in some way. And yeah, I'm not like a data person, but like I will write down the data and like do the work and also try and make it accessible. Did that answer your
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
great. Thanks so much.
Thanks for that question?
We are hoping to do more educational stuff, like this was just the pilot season, but sounds like we're gonna be putting more funding in to have a local, educators, it's called science. But this kind of local educators to talk with school groups more about the warbler, so go into St. Vincent schools. And so Lister is gonna be, local collaborator is gonna be doing that quite a bit next year, and we put some funding in, so that's also an option. If for further Antioch students or Kaitlyn to help out with the more educational part of this. So maybe talking with some EPE students would be a good idea to,
Yeah. And like going out and doing the point count is also fun. So putting it out there for all the Antioch students, jump on board if you're interested in it. It was a really, truly a life-changing experience. Thank you, Mike.
thanks, IIC for that.
Yeah, thanks, IIC.
Did you ever find yourself being resentful of a parrot? It's like
Oh man. Carrot, no. You're just like, okay, I get it. Like
yes.
so beautifully colored. It's just and I never saw one really up close. It was more just like, you know, a pair would fly by, but you would hear them. It's like a cough and just like parrot sound. It's awesome.
I love this warbler. The coloration is really cool.
The warbler? Yeah, let me so many cool
It is
things about this bird.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's just incredible. And if you go onto the internet, like Birds of the World or eBird, it's really fun to kind of see what people have. I don't know if there's a photo out there of what we know or can delineate as like a female or juvenile even, like still unsure. We thought we may have saw a female / and or juvenile bird. It's more brown, still has kind of a muted necklace there. But yeah, pretty cool warbler.
Yeah, you have to go into museum specimens, someone could see, and Glenroy could say, oh, looks like a immature female or a adult female, but that's kind of the best picture that anyone's thinking of the bird, but there aren't that many of those out there. Yeah, and it's got a really distinct tail cock, like it just kind of flips its tail up. It's a really compact bird. Yeah.
And for those of you who saw it in person, like you saw it in person, like so what's the color? It kind of seems like purplish, bluish, or what's the dark color?
So that's all black.
Black.
Yeah. Kind of gray, dark
Yeah,
gray,
it
black.
feels like charcoaly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Does it blend in with the ash color of
I would say darker than the ash, gosh, but almost like M.E.S. Yeah. And like the juvenile female that we think we saw was like well, like this kind of brown. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you all coming, and thank you, Dr. Dorian too, for joining.
And our shameless plug for folks, there will be a coffee order coming up soon for you or your loved ones. You can pick up some coffee, and a decent amount of that goes towards supporting students, international service and research like Kaitlyn's. And there's a web store that has some environmental studies department and IIC merchandise, like Josh's amazing, beautiful shirt designed by an Antioch student. So proceeds from that also go to support students. And there'll be a opportunity to submit requests for funding this spring for folks who might be thinking about international service or research. Anything you'd add to that, Mike?
That was all great, yeah.
The spiel.
And if you want more Whistling Warbler stuff, there is a whole BirdsCaribbean kind of big blog. If you're interested, that I'm happy to share the link out to. Our trip report is all public on eBird, so you can go crazy with that too. Yeah, that's it.
Great, thanks, Kayla.
You're welcome.